This is a reading from the Tao Te Ching. The way that can be told is not the eternal way. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. The source called darkness. Darkness within darkness. The gateway to all understanding. We've mentioned a few holy days today, a few holidays and a few stories. The festival of Hanukkah in the Hebrew scriptures commemorates a historical event about the Maccabean revolt, Jewish freedom fighters rising up against religious oppression by the Greco-Seleucid forces. And it's the story of the rededication of the Jewish temple that had been desecrated and become a Greco-Seleucid religious space. The rededication of that into a new old home for the Jewish people. All right, it's an old story. The story of winter solstice and Yule is an old story. The story of religions and people interacting, trying to find space to feel valued and worthy is an old story. If you're looking at it from a purely historical academic perspective, the story of Hanukkah is an old story and it is also a strange story. Hanukkah is the festival of lights that commemorates when a small amount of oil miraculously lasted 8 days and nights to light the temple, to provide hope and meaning. In this festival, it is a time to revel in the miracle of restorative darkness and decorative brilliance that's symbolized by the candles that sustain, not just through the 8 nights, but symbolically through the whole winter and into the time when the sun regains its place with longer days and more light. It's a reminder to take religious freedom seriously for ourselves and for our fellow travelers who want to learn and grow with one another. But it's an old story, right? Bit too miraculous for some of us, maybe. Probably not much use for us today, right? And I feel that. And I wonder what it must have felt like to have been in the temple with an army surrounding you and trying to find the light at the end of the tunnel. I wonder what it must have felt like to be sitting around and waiting day after day for light to appear, for hope to appear, for the interminable darkness, to be afraid to go outside because the folks who believe differently than you might be acting without regard for your best interest, to feel like the leaders of your nation might only want one religion to be taught and expressed freely, and to feel like maybe they don't know what to do to help heal any kind of division in the nation. I wonder how it feels to worry if the heating oil might go out, if the money for the bills might dry up because we can't work, if the latest horrific tragedy or attempted coup or the news of cancer or a heart attack or a car wreck or some inane tweet sends you spiraling and you just have to sit and wait, waiting for things to be filled with light so that you can get back to worshiping and expressing your religion the way that you're used to. Yeah, I can't imagine what this story has to tell us today. I like these old stories. And I believe in these old stories, not because I think they are objectively, historically true, every single bit of them, but because they have truth in them. And there's a reason that I think that these stories stick around and resonate with us, that they are old and yet newer and renewed with each passing day. Hanukkah is a celebration of having survived a time of either or, that it was either the Seleucids or the Jewish people. It was either the state religion or the religion of Israel. It's a story about when faith becomes weaponized and when creedal tests are imposed to see who is worthy and who is worth it. When we encounter something different, other, uncomfortable in these stories, stories from earth-centered traditions, stories from Black liberation theologians, stories from Zen Buddhists, from Sufi mystics, our own personal faiths and histories, they get put into a blender. And sometimes the default switch is either or. That we may not know how to interact, how to hear truth in another story, because that's what we've been taught. We may react like the Seleucids or like the Maccabeans with violence, physical, as folks like groups like the Proud Boys are wont to do, or metaphysical, which many liberals are often guilty of, seeking to see our tribe win out, replace, be better than, be superior to the other. And I wonder if it is often out of fear, deep down, that we worry that our stories won't be told, that our stories won't be valued, that we won't feel worthy or worth it. That's the hard part about being together. And in the story of the Hanukkah lights, we find a story about resilience and joy and faith and work and God and each other, and how all that being together can be really hard to deal with. Because it's also a story about that fear and about the trauma of oppression and hurt. It's a story about how we carry our wounds with us. And sometimes when we act out of the woundedness, that either or mindset is so easy to fall back on. It makes things simpler to think in black and white. It's so comfortable to wall off our hearts and make an us and them statement, to prevent anything that reminds us of our trauma, whether it's family, religious, personal, it doesn't matter where it comes from. The wounds all bleed the same and the scars all stick around. A few years ago, we talked about building sanctuary here at Restoration. And I proposed that the first step was embracing the discomfort of being more open and more universal. I think along with that is wrestling how we tell our own stories and how we shine our lights about who we are, what we believe, and how we intend to act because of it. So go with me on this metaphor. Let's be like the Maccabees. Let's do like the Maccabees. And imagine a rededicated and reconsecrated, restored, renewed, recovered, beloved community. A restoration that is free of anything that would repel open-hearted seekers. We're actually going to do a thought experiment here. You can close your eyes if you would like to. I'm talking about how we act to be open and inclusive. And I am not talking about how we attract white supremacists. Y'all, when we say everyone may have an asterisk because there are places where they can go and feed their hate and maybe they can get help and be transformed. I'm not sure that is our mission. That may be my mission at some point. If God speaks to me and she says, you got some work to do, that may be my new call, but I'm not sure that is our community's call. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about our people, people who are open and progressive and called to respond to love and justice. So close your eyes and imagine, what does this space look like? What does beloved community look like? What does it feel like? What would you feel when you know you're there? How do the people act? What do people say? What do they do? In this beloved community, how's the food? What does the music sound like? What kind of rituals are there? Be specific. Imagine. It's kind of renewed, rededicated space. And I want you to imagine how you add your blessing to that space. How do you participate in the redefining, the rededicating of that community? How do you shine your light? What cultural gifts do you bring? What stories do you tell about times when you needed to see the light at the end of the tunnel, to see the light lit up in the darkness, that place from which all creativity springs? What songs might you sing and share with this community? I want to be very intentional about this because one of the great privileges of being a minister is that I get to hold the stories of people. But the stories we tell, we don't often tell everyone. And sometimes people feel that they can tell me. I hold the stories from folks of every faith tradition in this congregation. And oftentimes it is the same message. At some point or another, I don't feel valued here. I don't feel worth it. My X is not respected. Y makes me feel not welcome. I don't like it when you do Z. We pray too much. We don't pray enough. I'm not comfortable with God's language. I'm scared to talk about God in public. I hold these stories. And that may sound like a divide, like a split, like a morass of either or, but I don't think so. I don't think it's a divide. I don't even really think it's a spectrum. I think our diversity is a festival of lights. Some from a menorah, some from a Yule log, the bonfire, the fireworks, from an Advent wreath, from dayas, from lit candles, Christmas lights. I think our diversity is light decorating the darkness from which everything and all creativity comes. But I wonder, as I hold these stories, why sometimes it is so hard to see each other's light and to feel like another's light is encroaching on ours, or to worry if our light has something to add. In this holiday season, I am struck by our need, my need for both and for light from many places, illuminating our sacred space. From that place of creation and restoration, from that darkness, all things spring. The gateway to understanding. I'm struck by those words. 3 years ago, I said that I hoped this place might become a sanctuary, that it had been a sanctuary for many of us. It continues to be a sanctuary still, a place of safety and comfort, but not stasis and complacency. And that this church, this congregation, this community, these people, to be sanctuary in the best sense of the word, I believe restoration has to be a place of healing and growth, a place of being and also becoming, a place of both and not either or. Not just a church or a community, not just a theistic congregation or a humanistic society, both and all of the above. It's what it is to be universal and to be based on love with a capital L. Friends, we are in a discernment process, not just as a community, but as a nation, with change being called for, and change is almost always needed because life is about change. And I believe that church, spiritual community, that faith-based value-centered affinity groups are about learning to deal with discomfort and change in ways that call us back into covenant, a covenant of love that we commit to honor when we join our voluntary association. That it is covenant that is the basis of all that we do. It is how we act towards one another and not about what we believe about the divine. The story of Hanukkah, of resilience and restoration, the light in the temple. It's what it's teaching me today. I think it's what it can teach us. What it means to celebrate not just the freedom to express who we are as individuals or small groups, not just getting by and making it through with the same comfortable routine, the same patterns, the same people, the same ideas, but what a diversity of light might do. Becoming intentional about differences, sexualities, aesthetics, cultures, perspectives, heaven forbid, theologies. There's potential discomfort there. There's potential ouch and oops. But it helps us build resilience. It helps us learn how to tell our story with more than just what kinds of theological words we use. Helps us to learn to tell our story not just from woundedness, but also from a place of restoration, a place of recovery. Not just telling the story about the desecration of the temple, the oppression, and the fear and the hurt and the pain that is all too real, but also telling the story of the light that shines out from that darkness. To have a big enough tent, it's got to be filled with everyone's candles. That universalism says and acts to show that you are welcome under this roof, and it is filled with enough light that everyone can see themselves represented, reflected, valued, that everyone is worthy and worth it. I hope that you have heard that message from this pulpit over the past 3 years, that you are loved and worthy of love. And I hope that it has reminded you if you forgot, convinced you if you didn't believe it in the first place, and comforted you if you ever doubted it. Because you stayed, despite the hurt, the ouch, the oops, you stayed. Even when places with names like restoration, with histories like restoration, have caused people pain for more than 2,000 years, you stayed. Like the Maccabees and those who rededicated the temple, we have choices. We can flip the either or switch, or we can learn to act and breathe in both and to increase the light in our holy spaces and not take them away. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. It's not clear what the path forward is. It's hard. I know that. I don't have easy answers. Thankfully, it is not just my own human insecurities that accompany me on this journey, that accompany you, that accompany us of being together in the darkness, finding ways to shine our lights. In the words of Rebecca Parker, there is a love holding all that I love. All of us, you and me both. We can rest in that love. Remember that love. Friends, that's the basis of our congregational covenant. And that is also what we in the business refer to as a miracle. The miracle of being together in messy relationship, of finding great unity and great difference, of learning to get along with those differences and struggling to learn to be together, to learn how to sing each other's songs. Friends, remember that we are all going through this, and that everyone here found this place because they were searching for something or because someone they love was searching for something, carrying not just wounds, but hopes. And that woundedness is only one part of the story. That the other part is hope and healing and restoration and recovery and rededicated light shining out amongst the dark. Friends, I believe we need one another, to learn from one another, to teach one another, to share stories, to sing songs, to dance dances. I believe that we are made to be in relationship, to build sanctuaries out of relationship. I believe that our lights need to shine out of those places based on covenantal faith. The covenant of love that cannot be defeated, the light that cannot be put out, the love that calls us back to the table after ouch or oops. The love that tells us that our story is made better by hearing the stories of others and being challenged to new growth and new understanding. My friends, my hope is that this holiday season, you will remember that you are worthy and you are worth it. And so is your neighbor. And that what feeds you may not feed them, and that hopefully something next week will feed them, but it may not totally resonate with you. That's okay. This week may be a week of joy. Next may be a week of sorrow. It's both and that we're working for. Maybe I can learn something from you sharing your journey with me. Maybe I share something that helps you. Maybe I learn to get something out of meditation. Maybe you feel like prayer speaks to you for the first time in years. Maybe you find nature calls to you. Maybe you feel a prickle down your spine when listening to a hymn that you haven't thought about in a while. Maybe you want to learn more about the Baha'i faith, about Taoism. I said these words 3 years ago. Whether you identify as pagan, Buddhist, Jewish, Christian, atheist, faithist, humanist, agnostic, pantheist, panentheist, or seeker, my prayer is that we might be open to building our sanctuary here at the corner of Stenton Avenue and beloved community out of different illuminated materials, and not shy away from raising our different voices and perspectives that don't fit the white-centered, rational academic mold that so many people believe about Unitarian Universalism. Because there is a love holding all that we love, and our covenant of love binds us together, is pulling us forward and begs us to shine our lights together, reminds us that we are worthy and worth it, that our stories are not just stories of either wounded or restored, but both and wounded, hopeful, light, dark, restored, rededicated, still working on it. Not either or, both and all. And y'all, that is a story worth telling. And it is a reason to hope and celebrate in this holiday season. May it be so. Amen.